My family stayed quiet when my jobless sister lived off my cash for years. But when I refused to co-sign a loan for her new house and car, they labeled me selfish and tried to destroy my job. Have you ever been blindsided by betrayal from the people who are supposed to love you the most? The kind of betrayal that makes you question everything you thought you knew about family, trust, and even yourself? Because that's what happened at my mom's birthday dinner, and it wasn't just a betrayal. It was a calculated scheme that had been stealing from me for years. My name is Jay, and I'm a county property appraiser. For 4 years, it's been steady, quiet work. I have my own place, my car's paid off. I've been handling my life since I was 19. I'm self-sufficient, you know? But then there's Nora. She's 23, a part-time stylist, and honestly, her money is inconsistent. The thing nobody said out loud, but everyone knew, especially my parents, Gerald and Diane. I'd been covering half her rent for over a year. They just never acknowledged it. Mom's birthday dinner was supposed to be low-key. Home-cooked grocery store cake, the usual crew. Me, Gerald, Nora, Diane, Grandpa Walt, and then Gerald's side of the family. Phil, Judy, Loretta, and Greg, who always laughed like showing up was a huge favor. Dinner started normal enough. Chicken, small talk, that forced warmth that's familiar to so many family gatherings. Grandpa Walt, as always, sat at the end, quiet, just watching. Gerald, my dad, he sort of ran the table. And Nora, she was glowing next to him. Then, about halfway through the meal, Nora slid a small wrapped box across the table towards me, a grin plastered on her face. "Got you something, Jay," she chirped. It wasn't my birthday. I wasn't expecting anything. But everyone was watching, so I unwrapped it. It was a novelty mug. White ceramic. Big, black letters across the front. World's best ATM. The table erupted in laughter. Aunt Judy covered her mouth. Phil chuckled. Even my mom cracked a smile, the kind that says, "I know this landed wrong, but laughing is easier than saying something about it." Greg, though, he laughed the longest. Not a polite laugh. The kind that goes a beat past where it should stop. The kind that tells you the person isn't embarrassed about finding it funny. He was enjoying it. I looked at that mug for about 3 seconds. Then I set it down without touching it again. "Hilarious," I said. "Dead. Flat." Nobody noticed the shift, or if they did, nobody said anything. That's how it always worked. Don't make waves. Don't cause a scene. Pretend everything's fine. 10 minutes later, Nora dropped the real bomb. Totally casual, she said she was thinking about getting a new car, something reliable, maybe a little nicer. Gerald, of course, nodded before she even finished. "You deserve it, Nora. You work hard." She works like 12 hours a week. But the car wasn't even the main event. Gerald leaned back, then reached into his jacket pocket like he'd been carrying this paper around all night, waiting for the perfect moment. He slid a folded document across the table directly toward me. I picked it up. My stomach tightened. It was neat, organized. Monthly dollar amounts, stretching forward 12 months. A timeline, a breakdown of contributions. And I was the only name on the list. At the bottom, a signature line with my name pre-typed next to it. A family contribution plan. The numbers weren't small. I was supposed to help Nora with a house down payment. Not just contribute, co-sign. Put my actual name on a mortgage. And at the very bottom, in smaller text, clearly meant to slip past unnoticed, a line about adding Nora as an authorized user on my credit card to build her credit history. I set the paper down, looked up at Gerald. "Nora already toured 3 houses last week," he said, his tone conversational, like this was all settled weeks ago. "She told the realtor you'd help make it happen." I turned to Nora. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her plate. Not embarrassed. Not guilty. Just waiting. The way you wait for someone to sign something that was already decided. That's when Grandpa Walt cleared his throat. He hadn't said a word all evening. Hadn't needed to. But he spoke up now. An entire table went still. Not because he was loud, because he never did this. "I've been sitting here for 20 minutes, Walt said, his voice slow and deliberate. "And this is the craziest thing I've ever heard." Gerald shifted in his seat. "Dad, this is a family matter." "I know it's a family matter," Walt shot back. "That's why I'm the one saying it." Walt looked around the table, slowly, deliberately. Then he fixed his eyes on Gerald. "Jay pays half Nora's rent. Has been for over a year. You know that. Diane knows that. And you've been happy letting everyone else believe it was you." Dead silence. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. That's not a contribution plan, Walt stated, his voice low and firm. That's a shakedown. Aunt Judy opened her mouth, probably to mediate, to smooth everything over, to do the thing she always did when the air got uncomfortable. Walt held up one hand without looking at her. She closed her mouth. Gerald recovered fast. He turned to me with that expression, the one that had been making me feel small since I was a kid. This is exactly your problem, Jay. You've always been cold. This is why people don't warm to you. Nora looked up from her plate for the first time all night. You act like you're a provider, but you don't even provide joy. I looked at the mug sitting next to my plate. World's best ATM. Then I looked at Gerald, then Nora, then back at Gerald. No, I said. Just one word. But I said it with everything I had behind it. My voice was quiet, but it resonated with a force I hadn't known I possessed. No car, no house, no cosign, no credit card access, nothing. And the rent stops tonight, too. Gerald's face went dark. The disciplinarian mask. The one that had worked on me every single time since I was a kid. Jay, this is about family. This is about... Then act like it, I interrupted. His jaw tightened. Something shifted behind his eyes. The look of a man reaching for the last card in his hand. You do this and you're done. No holidays, no family events. You're out. And don't come crawling back later expecting us to pretend this didn't happen. Nobody at the table moved. Nobody said a word. Not Judy, not Phil, not Loretta. The threat hung there in the open, and nobody pushed back on it, which told me everything I needed to know about where they all stood. This is extortion with table manners, I said. The room didn't move, didn't breathe. I stood up, grabbed my jacket. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam anything. I didn't wait for anyone to respond. I just walked out the front door while they were still sitting there, forks frozen midair, staring at the space where I'd been. I sat in my car for 2 minutes, hands on the wheel, just breathing. Then I drove home. The calls started before I even got to my apartment. Nora called 17 times that first week. I didn't block her right away. Part of me still thought she might say something real. By the time I understood she wouldn't, the sheer number of calls was already its own message. One late-night message was all vulnerability. I'm scared, Jay. Then 30 seconds later, so just send the money and this all goes away. There it was. The rest of the family got in line behind her. Different voices, same loop. Calm down. Be reasonable. Don't embarrass us. I blocked every number as fast as they came in, but I saved every message first. All of it went into a folder on my phone. The online stuff started day 3. Nora posted something deliberately vague. No names. Just the kind of line that makes everyone reading it already know who it's about. Finding out who your real family is. Some people only show up when it's easy. The comments filled up fast. Judy first, then other relatives, then their friends who didn't know a single fact but had an opinion. Within a day, the narrative was locked in. Jay blew up the family over nothing. I screenshotted everything. Every post, every comment, every thread. Screenshot. Timestamp. Filed. The one that actually cut, and I'll be honest, it really did, was Loretta, my dad's mom. One voicemail. Short, soft, and somehow worse than all the loud ones combined. You were always so difficult, Jay, even as a little boy. That's the kind of line that doesn't accuse you. It rewrites you. Takes years of being squeezed and reframes the whole thing as a personality trait. You're not responding to being exploited. You're just difficult. Always have been. And enough people repeat it enough times, and you start to wonder if they're right. The one person who called and actually said something useful was my Aunt Tanya, my mom's sister. She wasn't tangled up in the chaos the way the others were. She called on day 4, kept it quiet, didn't take sides out loud, but she said one thing that stuck. Jay, I know what it's like to be the one everyone points at. Just be careful and document everything. I'd spent my whole life thinking of Tanya as the quiet aunt who showed up at holidays and didn't make waves. Turns out she'd been through her own version of this years ago, something I only half remembered as a kid. She recognized what was happening before I'd even put words to it, and she was the only person in the entire family who warned me about it instead of pressuring me to back down. I thanked her and I meant it completely. What none of them understood, not Greg, not Judy, not any of them, is that being the bigger person was exactly what I'd been doing my entire life. Every time I handed over rent money without being asked, Every time I said yes to something I didn't agree with because saying no would have started a war. Every time I swallowed the humiliation and kept moving because keeping the peace was what the family expected of me. I was done being the bigger person. It hadn't gotten me a single thing. 2 weeks in, the pressure shifted from words to actions, and that's when things got real. Wednesday morning, I was at my desk at the county office, halfway through an assessment report, when my supervisor, Carol, called me into her office. No warning, just a short email that said, "Come see me when you get a minute." When I walked in, she looked uncomfortable, not angry, uncomfortable, the way someone does when they've been handed something awkward and don't know what to do with it yet. "Jay, I got a phone call this morning," she said, "from a man who said he was your father. He identified himself as Gerald, said he was concerned about your mental state, said you'd been acting unstable, and he was worried something might happen at work." The cold feeling in my chest wasn't panic. It was something steadier than that, something that clicked into place. "Did he give you any specifics?" I asked. Calm, no edge. "Not really, just general concern." He sounded worried. I sat down, kept my expression neutral. Carol was watching me carefully, not because she believed what Gerald had said, but because the call had to be documented. I gave her the short version. Family conflict, financial demands I'd refused. My dad had a reason to want me discredited. I kept it factual. No emotion. No dramatics. Just the situation, laid out clean. Carol wrote it down. Said my performance file was spotless, and that as long as it stayed that way, there was nothing to worry about. I thanked her and walked back to my desk. I pulled out my phone and logged everything Carol had said. He hadn't called my workplace out of anger. He'd done it strategically. Plant a seed. Create a paper trail. Make me look unstable before anything else happened. A quiet setup. I was going to make sure that setup didn't stick. The next morning, I went in early before anyone else was there and wrote up a short summary of the family situation. Just the relevant facts, nothing emotional, and emailed it to Carol with a request that be added to my file alongside the note about Gerald's phone call. I wanted it documented, both sides, so that if Gerald ever tried this angle again, there was context on record that told the full story. The notary ambush came about 5 days after that. I got home from work to find a note taped to my front door. Handwritten, surprisingly neat, from Aunt Judy and someone named Don, a guy I'd never met who turned out to be a notary Judy knew from somewhere. The note said they wanted to stop by and talk things through, and that they had some paperwork that could help resolve this quickly. Paperwork, with a notary present. I knew exactly what that was. A loan agreement, or some kind of family contract that would lock me into paying for Nora going forward. Something with a signature line and a notary stamp that would make it binding. They showed up 2 hours later. I watched through the peephole. Didn't open the door. Judy knocked 3 times. Waited. Knocked again. Said something about how she was just trying to help everyone move forward. Don stood next to her, holding a manila folder, looking bored out of his mind. They waited 5 minutes, then left. I'd recorded the whole thing on my phone, held up near the peephole. Judy's voice was clear enough. Archived it. The fact that they showed up with a notary told me everything. They were trying to manufacture a binding obligation, a trap with a signature line, and some garbage about helping everyone move forward. Gerald started showing up places around that time, not following me. Nothing that obvious or traceable, just appearing. The gas station near my apartment. The grocery store I hit on weekends. The parking lot of the hardware store. Standing there scrolling his phone, like he just happened to be in the neighborhood. Each time, we'd lock eyes for about 2 seconds. Neither of us said a word. Then one of us would leave. I started changing everything. Different gas station. Different grocery store. Varied my route to work. Kept my head up every time I walked into a new space. Then Gerald pulled a move I didn't see coming. About a week after the surveillance started, my building manager called me into his office. Said he'd received a written complaint. Someone had filed a formal noise and nuisance report against my unit. Claimed I'd been causing disturbances, loud arguments, late-night activity, the whole list. The kind of generic complaint that doesn't require proof. Just a signature and a mailing address. I asked who had filed it. He showed me the form. Gerald's handwriting. Gerald's signature. The complaint was fiction, every word of it, but it was on paper now in the building's records. And that was the point. I took a photo of the complaint form, added it to the case. Then I sat down with my building manager and walked him through the situation. The dinner, the financial demands, the paperwork trap they tried to spring on me, the harassment since then. Kept it calm, kept it factual. He looked at the complaint form and shook his head. "I'll note it in the file," he said, "but I want your version documented alongside it." 2 complaints in 2 different places, both fiction, both on record. Gerald was trying to put my life on paper without me. 3 weeks in, my mom called. "Jay, please come over. Something's wrong. I don't want to bother you, but I don't know who else to call." My gut screamed no, but it was my mom. I went. The living room was full when I walked in. Gerald, Nora, Aunt Judy, Uncle Phil, Loretta, even Greg, leaning against the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed like he was trying to look casual and failing at it. It wasn't an emergency. It was a setup. They had it choreographed. Judy kicked it off, laid out how the family was falling apart, how everyone just wanted things to go back to the way they were, how I was punishing people who love you. Phil nodded along every few sentences. Loretta, from her chair in the corner, said something soft and quiet. "You were always so difficult, Jay." I looked around the room, counted every face, noted who was there and who wasn't. Grandpa Walt was not in the room. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, hit record, and set it face down on the arm of the couch, microphone pointing outward. "Go ahead," he said. "Keep going." They kept going. For about 20 minutes, they took turns explaining what I owed Nora, what I owed the family, what I owed my parents just for being raised. Judy got emotional, real tears, the kind that come from genuinely believing your own performance. At one point, she turned to me with this sincere, almost warm expression and said, "You're good at fixing things, Jay. That's your role in this family." "That's the problem," I said. Quiet, flat. She blinked, kept going like I hadn't spoken. Nora sat through the whole thing with her arms crossed, staring at the carpet. I let them finish. Then I picked up my phone, recording still running, and said, "I appreciate the effort. Nothing changes. I'm leaving." Walked out. The drive home was quiet. 20 minutes of people I'd grown up with listing reasons why I owed someone my money. Not one of them had asked a single question about how I was doing. They'd just come with their list and expected me to fold. Walt called me an hour later, furious, and not at me. "They told me you were coming over to hang out," he said, his voice tight in the way it gets when he's angrier than he's letting show. "They lied to get me out of the house so they could set you up." "Yeah," I said. "They did." "That's manipulative. That's a straight-up ambush, Jay." "I know, but now I have it on tape." Walt went quiet for a second. Then, "Good." That gave me something valuable. Someone who'd seen the dinner. Someone they deliberately kept away from the ambush. And someone who was pissed enough to back me up. I installed cameras the next week. 3 small ones. One pointed at my front door from inside, one covering the hallway outside my apartment, and one tucked on a shelf catching the living room and kitchen. Nothing expensive, the kind you pick up at any electronics store. I told nobody about them. The break-in happened on a Thursday evening. I came home from work and the door was unlocked. Not forced, not damaged, just open. Sitting there like someone had used a key, walked in, done what they needed to do, and left. My laptop was gone, a small portable scanner I used for work. And the thing that hit hardest, the thing that made something tighten in my chest in a way none of the other stuff did, my great-grandfather's watch was missing from the dresser. A plain silver watch that had belonged to Walt's father, my great-grandfather, the one I only knew through stories. Walt had put it on my wrist when I was 15 and said, "Keep time for the men who couldn't." Not expensive, just the last physical thing I had left of him. Gone. But he hadn't taken everything. On the kitchen counter, right in the middle where I'd see it the second I walked in, was the mug, the white ceramic one, world's best ATM. I hadn't displayed it. I'd left it in a drawer after the dinner, shoved it in the back where I didn't have to look at it. He'd gone looking for it, found it, set it out. That wasn't theft. That was a statement. I checked the camera footage before I did anything else. The video was grainy but workable. Hands working the lock with a key. A figure moving through the apartment, loading items into a bag. The face stayed angled away. Whoever did it knew about cameras, or was just being careful. But the build was right. The jacket was right. The way he moved through the space. Confident, unhurried, like he knew the layout. That was right, too. I called the police, filed a report, gave the officer the footage and the full timeline of everything that had happened since the dinner. He took it all, wrote it down, and said someone would be in touch. That night, I sat on my couch with the door locked, new lock installed that same evening, and went through the evidence folder on my phone one more time. Every screenshot, every voicemail, every recording. And then I started thinking about the bank stuff. Gerald had been building paper trails everywhere. The workplace call, the building complaint, the notary visit, all of it designed to create records that painted a certain picture. That pattern made me wonder what other records existed that I didn't know about. I pulled up every account I could think of. The joint account with Nora. The family savings account I'd been putting money into since I was 16. A handful of others with my name on them from years back that I'd never bothered to check. Every statement showed the same thing. Money moving in directions I'd never authorized. Most of those accounts had been opened when I was a minor, with Gerald listed alongside me. One of those family convenience choices that turns into a weapon later. I'd never cleaned it up because I'd never imagined I needed protection from him. The joint account with Nora had about $2,400 in it, all for me. I transferred every cent to my personal account the next morning. Then I closed it. I was building a file, piece by piece, and every single piece was starting to connect. The police took their time. 10 days before a detective called back. When she did, we sat down for 2 hours and went through the footage. She had enough to move forward. A week after that meeting, the detective called again. They tracked my laptop through a pawn shop intake log and a serial number. The pawn paperwork gave them enough to bring him in without it being just family drama anymore. Gerald didn't just pawn what he could. He kept the key on him. When they questioned him, they took it, bagged it, logged it, and eventually they handed it back to me like it was just another piece of property. Some of the stolen stuff surfaced fast. Pawn shop paperwork is boring until it saves you. My laptop and the scanner showed up first. The watch took longer, but it came back too. Not because anyone had a conscience, but because paper trails don't care about excuses. I needed to move. My apartment didn't feel safe anymore. Not after the break-in. Not after the cameras. Not after Gerald showing up everywhere I went. So, I applied for a 1-bedroom near the county office. Standard stuff. Income verification, employment check, credit pull. They called me back 2 days later, denied. The woman on the phone said there was a flag on my credit report. Something recent didn't match the rest of my history. Told me to pull my own report and look into it. I did that night. There it was. A title loan opened 6 months ago, attached to my vehicle. $4,800. My name, my social security number, my signature. None of which I had provided. The title had been at Diane's house for years, safe in the family file cabinet. I'd never thought to take it back because I'd never thought I needed to protect myself from my own father. Gerald had opened this before the dinner, before any of this blew up. It had been sitting on my report for months, quietly doing damage I didn't know about. And it wasn't just open. It was behind late, enough to throw a shadow across everything I tried to do next. I wanted to put my fist through the table. I sat there for about 10 seconds, jaw clenched. Then I started logging. Date, amount, account details, everything. I didn't punch anything. I documented everything. That was the night it stopped being a family argument in my head. This was fraud. This was identity theft. This was criminal. And it was provable. And I was going to make sure someone with the authority to care about it knew exactly what had happened. I found a lawyer, a guy named Alan. Solid reputation. Handled civil cases. Didn't waste your time. I sat in his office a few days later and laid everything out. Every document, every recording, every bank record. The credit report with the fraudulent title loan right there in black and white. Every screenshot. Alan went through it all without interrupting. Asked a few sharp questions at the end. He laid out the strategy. 2 tracks running simultaneously. First track, criminal complaints. Fraud, identity theft. The title loan was the clearest piece. $4,800 extracted using my identity, my forged signature, and my social security number. Alan got copies of the original loan paperwork directly from the lender. The signature was close. Good enough to fool a clerk on a busy afternoon, but it wasn't mine. And the social security number had been pulled from old documents Gerald had kept from my childhood. That was a crime. Second track, a civil lawsuit. Everything Gerald had taken from me. documented and priced. The forged title loan. The joint account drained. The family savings account, one I'd been contributing to since I was 16, which I discovered he'd been pulling from for years. When I finally checked the balance, it was down to $6,200. I withdrew it all, closed the account. The total damage across every account and every form of financial manipulation added up to more than $13,000. Alan also recommended cease and desist letters immediately. One to Gerald, one to Judy. Formal, on letterhead, the kind of document that tells people the rules have changed. I paid Alan's retainer that same week, $3,500. It hurt. That was money I'd been building carefully for months. I picked up freelance appraisal work on weekends to cover the gap, inspections for private sales, the kind of jobs that paid decent but took up hours I didn't have. I didn't complain about it, not once. This was what it cost to fight back properly. I was willing to pay every cent of it. The cease and desist letters went out within a week. And instead of backing off, Gerald's side doubled down. He had a lawyer, too. That fact alone told me he'd been preparing for this longer than I thought. You don't retain legal representation the moment someone says no at a dinner table. This had been anticipated. His lawyer sent a response letter claiming implied consent. The argument was that because I'd been supporting Nora financially for over a year, I had established a pattern that she was legally entitled to continue relying on. It was a stretch, Alan said as much plainly, but it was enough to buy time. The stalling got worse after that. Missing documents, requests for continuances, confusion about dates. Every time Alan pushed, Gerald's lawyer found a way to buy another week. It was a grind. Slow, frustrating, expensive. Alan warned me early and clearly. One moment of lost composure in court, on record, anywhere official, and they would use it to paint me as unstable and emotional. That was the play Gerald's lawyer was banking on. Get me to react, then point to it and say, look, this is who he really is. I didn't give them that. When I was on record, I referred to Gerald as Sir. Not out of respect, out of distance. It was a signal, deliberate, cold, and unmistakable. This wasn't a father-son argument anymore. It was a legal matter, and I was going to treat it exactly like one. Say it again, slower, I told Gerald during one recorded phone call he'd initiated, one where he'd started demanding I stop this whole circus and come back to the family. I wanted the recording clean. He hung up without another word. The recording was crystal clear. The hearing was on a gray Tuesday in late autumn. I wore a plain dark suit, no tie, and sat next to Alan on one side of the room. Gerald was on the other side with his lawyer. Nora was off to the side in the gallery. She looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter. I didn't look at her for long. Then Grandpa Walt took the stand. 74 years old, button-up shirt, his good jacket, sitting up straight like he'd been waiting for this. When the judge asked him to describe his relationship to the parties, he said it plainly. I'm Diane's father, and I'm Jay's grandfather. He was asked to describe what he witnessed at the birthday dinner, and he did. Slow, thorough, every detail, the gag gift, the contribution plan, the way Gerald had presented the whole thing like it was already decided, the way Nora had mentioned a realtor before Gerald even brought up the house. Then the judge asked about the financial support, whether Walt had direct knowledge that Jay had been paying Nora's rent. I found out that night, Walt said. Gerald had let everyone in the family believe he was the one covering it. He wasn't. Jay was. Had been for over a year. He paused, looked across the room at Gerald. I should have asked sooner. That one's on me. Gerald's lawyer tried to cross-examine, asked whether Walt was just going on what Jay had told him, or whether he had independent knowledge. Walt looked at her with an expression that could have frozen the room. Ma'am, Jay printed the statements and handed them to me the week after that dinner. His name is on every single deposit. Gerald's name isn't on one. Silence. Gerald's lawyer shifted in her seat. Gerald himself stared at the table in front of him. Alan waited, let it hang there, made sure the judge felt every second of it before he moved on. The turning point arrived during Gerald's own testimony. He'd been solid up to that point, measured, reasonable, playing the role of the concerned father who just wanted to help his daughter succeed. His lawyer had prepped him well. He spoke in calm sentences and used words like responsibility and family unity. He sounded credible to anyone who didn't know better. Then Alan stood up. The first few questions were easy, just establishing basic facts, getting Gerald comfortable. Then Alan pulled out a printed copy of a text message thread. Gerald to Judy, obtained through discovery. Can you read this message for the court? Alan said, the one dated 3 days before the birthday dinner. Gerald read it. His jaw tightened. The first crack. The message said, we all agreed he'll calm down and pay later. Just keep the pressure on. The room went quiet. Not a gasp. Not anything dramatic. Just dead air. The kind that lands when someone says something true in a place where lies don't work anymore. Gerald tried to spin it, said it was out of context, said, we didn't mean what it sounded like. His lawyer objected. Alan had 3 more messages in the same thread, each one tightening the same picture. The out of context defense started looking thinner with everyone, and that's when Aunt Judy, sitting in the gallery, cracked it wide open. She'd testified earlier that morning briefly about the notary visit. She'd been vague and evasive, the way people get when they know they're standing on thin ice. But when the message thread came up during Gerald's cross-examination, she blurted out, loud enough for the court reporter to catch every word. We didn't think he'd actually go this far. Every head in the room turned. The judge's head snapped up. Miss Judy, he said, sharp as a gavel, you are not testifying right now. One more outburst, and you will be removed from this courtroom. Judy sank back like the air had been punched out of her. Alan didn't flinch, didn't react. Just let it sit there. Let the judge hear it. Let it do its damage on its own. The rest of the hearing moved faster after that. I sat through all of it the way Alan had coached me. No fidgeting. No expression that could be read as anything other than calm. When I spoke in short sentences. Dates, amounts, facts. No editorializing. When Gerald's lawyer tried to frame me as someone who had chosen conflict over family, I looked at her and said, we can discuss feelings after we discuss felonies. Alan actually smiled at that one. The judge did not. Tanya testified briefly that afternoon, too. Not about the dinner or the money, but about the pattern. She described her own experience. Years ago, the way the family had turned on her for setting a boundary. It gave the judge context. Showed that what happened to me wasn't a one-time thing. It was how this family worked. The verdict came down 2 weeks later in writing. I read it at Alan's office, sitting in the same chair where I'd first laid out the whole mess months earlier. A civil judgment for the full documented amount, a protective order, and a written finding that the fraud and identity theft claims were supported by evidence. Enough that the criminal complaints stopped being family stuff and started being a file with teeth. Not a prison sentence. Not a dramatic collapse in front of a courtroom full of strangers. But it was permanent. It was documented. And it was real. It was also, for the first time in this whole thing, the truth on the record, where it couldn't be rewritten or minimized. Things didn't blow up overnight. They came in slow, steady over weeks and months, but every single one landed. Gerald's landscaping business, the small lawn care company he'd built over 15 years, quietly folded about 6 weeks after the verdict. Word of mouth in a small town. A handful of clients saw the court records and stopped calling. Gerald lost the thing he valued most, the appearance of being a man who had his life under control. Aunt Judy went quiet after the verdict, the kind of quiet that means the game is over and everyone knows it. Phil sent one text, I hope this works out for everyone, which was about as much emotional investment as Phil had ever shown about anything. Greg disappeared. Loretta never acknowledged any of it happened. Nora was the one I paid closest attention to. She tried to reach me at first. I blocked everything. 2 months later, Tanya told me Nora had gotten her own lease. Salon work plus a second shift at a dry cleaner. For the first time in her adult life, she was figuring it out. 23 years of being told you're the golden child doesn't make you strong, it makes you brittle. Tanya became something real after that. Not dramatic, just consistent. A text every couple of weeks, a check-in on my birthday. She'd been through her own version of this years ago. She understood what it cost. 3 months after the verdict, I went to my mom's place. Not to reconcile, not to make peace. There was a box of old stuff at Diane's house I needed back. Photos, documents from when I was a kid. Things I wanted before I closed out that address entirely. Diane opened the door when I knocked. She looked tired, like something inside her had finally stopped running. She stepped aside to let me in. Didn't say anything. I grabbed the box from the hallway closet. Took about 3 minutes. When I turned to leave, she was standing in the kitchen doorway. "Jay," she said. I stopped. Didn't turn all the way around. "I know it doesn't change anything." Her voice was steady. "I chose peace over you for years. And I told myself it was the right thing to do because it was easier. It wasn't the right thing." I stood there for a second. Let that settle. "Yeah," I said. "It wasn't." She didn't cry or ask for forgiveness. She didn't dress it up into something smaller. She just nodded once and stared at the floor. I left. About a week later, on a Saturday morning, I wrote 2 words on a plain sheet of paper and slid it into an envelope with a spare key the police had returned to me. I didn't take it to Gerald. I took it to Alan's office and left it with the receptionist, letting it move through official hands like everything else had. Alan mailed it certified. The note said no access. An hour later, my phone buzzed from an unknown number. "You think you're better than all of us now." I stared at it. Then I sent back, "You don't miss me. You miss access." Then I blocked the number. The old photos were still spread across my table. I pushed them aside and opened the small evidence bag from the pawn shop recovery. The watch dropped into my palm. My great-grandfather's. The one Walt put on my wrist when I was 15. I held it for a long moment, then strapped it on where it belonged. Once the protective order was filed and the payments cleared, I changed everything. Address, routines, number, quietly, like closing a door that doesn't need to be slammed. Outside, the city kept moving. And for the first time in 26 years, nobody else had a key to my life. So that's my story. It's been a long, hard road, but I finally feel free. What would you have done in my place when your own family turned on you like that? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with people you loved? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.